Hey, so I had this thought train going on in my head recently of like game length versus pricing. And I'll admit, this thought train popped up after listening to a certain podcast where some game developers were talking about, how there was a dramatic amount of layoffs in the gaming industry over this past year. I think it was like 10,000 layoffs overall, all overall the game studios that everybody knows about and such. And one of the things that came up was, we're seeing the layoffs that the companies are having to downsize because they upsized during COVID. Now that everything is starting to settle out more and people are getting back to regular lives and all that, is that now they're letting people go of different developers and everything. So um, the thought train started to pop up in my head of like, hmm, right now you have two different designs of philosophy when it comes to how big a story mode should be, how much content should be in a game. So one of the philosophies is, you can make like a 10 to like a maybe a 25, 30 hour story driven game. The other philosophy is 100 hours plus. So two very different takes of how much content is in one single game. And, because of that, it really comes down to like how long you have to wait for each game to be made, the amount of of pricing for each and everything. So I just wanted to go through kind of a couple different talking points of everything. So $70. So whether you have a game that is normally like a 20 to 40 hour game, or I'm just talking story driven content, because multiplayer games you can have as many tens of hours, 100 hours, 200, 300, 400 hours on a multiplayer game, whatever. It's always, there's always something new to be doing with a multiplayer game. Every match is different. I'm not, it's basically, that's a different topic of conversation. But this topic of conversation basically is just for story driven games, because once you play through a story driven game, unless there's like something in New Game Plus that really makes you want to come back to it, once you see a story mode, it's done. That's kind of like, okay, you start it up, you hit the end credits, you're most likely done with it. There might be an epilogue after the credits. Again, New Game Plus might add a couple features here and there. Like Starfield, we've seen. I'm pretty sure after you beat the game, you go into New Game Plus technically. Then there's like more dialogue options that you can go into. Alan Wake 2 just had a New Game Plus mode where it adds some extra dialogue options in that. So $70 price tag for most games. Sometimes it's 60, but $70 price tag. Sometimes it's even 50. The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered is going to be a $50 title. It is, basically updating a lot of visuals. There's actually extra DLC that comes packaged in with it, a bunch of different stuff. So that's like one package deal. Or if it's an indie title, a lot of times it'll be, somewhat $30, but then there's a lot of times where it'll also still be like a $50 package deal if you get like a deluxe edition. But big AAA, big budget games, something that is a mainstay focus for everyone is, like Grand Theft Auto 6 is going to be, it's weird to actually say that. We can say that now, it's confirmed. But Grand Theft Auto 6, it's going to be a $70 game. We know it's going to be a $70 game across every platform. It's going to be $70. It's probably going to be 110 or something, for a deluxe edition of some kind. So the difference in between something like a Grand Theft Auto and, let's say, like a Resident Evil or a Last of Us is just the fact that Grand Theft Auto has just so much more content than a Resident Evil or a Last of Us, and that's just because there's so much free roam. There's just like a crazy amount of side quests and random strangers you can run into and all that. So it's a sandbox, open world game. There's just going to be inherently more content. There's going to be way more hours of stuff to do. So $70 for the one that has probably double, three times the amount of content. Who knows how much is going to be in Grand Theft Auto 6, but normally that's usually what it is because it's sandbox, because there's so many random, occurrences and everything, versus $70 also for a game that is probably shorter in time, where Grand Theft Auto you can spend probably 100 hours, doing everything in it, where The Last of Us, it's like roughly, I think it's Last of Us Part 2 is like roughly like maybe 30, 40 hours if you're really taking your time. You can kind of just power through it within probably like a 10 to 15 hour mark or something. I don't know. Again, these numbers, I'm just blurting numbers out, kind of. Just ballpark figure on these numbers. But so the fact that $70 for both different ways of design and thinking and approach at this, but then how much do people even have enough time to finish games? And that's one of the things. If you look at the completion, either achievements or trophies, you'll end up notice is that people, most of the time, people are not actually finishing games. And this is like one of these things that keeps happening over and over and over again, is that a lot of times people, they'll get halfway through a game, they'll get stuck on a boss, or they can't figure out how to do a puzzle, or they just don't have enough time to run through it. And what they'll do is they'll go to YouTube and, or maybe they're just not feeling it, but they want to see what the story is. They'll go to YouTube, they'll watch somebody's playthrough. That's the reason why YouTube playthroughs have, millions, like tens of millions of views. It's not because people aren't buying the game, but there's a lot of times where people are like, okay, well, how did you get from point A to point B over here? How did you solve the puzzle? Or what is the ending of this? And so you end up seeing that in trophies and achievements lists of like, a lot of times, majority of games people don't finish. Even some of your biggest games out there that are like the biggest AAA big budget stuff, people don't finish them because, again, life happens. They just don't have time enough to do it. So it really it sparks up a conversation of like, so do we need 100-hour plus titles out there? I know there's a lot of people that'll look at a campaign, and if it's like 5 hours, they're just like, this ain't worth the $70. So then it's like, okay, so if you buy something, if you spend full price on a game, and it's say 10 hours, 8 hours, somewhere's in that ballpark figure, the lower number of hours, and you spend full price $70 for it, but it's almost guaranteed that you're going to be able to finish it. Is that almost better than having 100 hours plus of content, and there's probably a 90% chance that you're never going to finish it, but you're still paying full price for it? So you're paying full price for a product that you're not actually going to yourself personally get through and finish. So it's just kind of like back and forth. Like this is something like when on a developer side, I would think they have to go to, like, there's board meetings and publisher meetings and everything else that you'd be going through, thinking about stuff like this of like, okay, so what's the price tag? How much content do we have? Is it worth, how much did it cost to make the thing too? Because that's another thing of like the cost of making games versus how many years it takes to make something. It's a whole different conversation on itself too. So if you're paying $70 for a game and it costs them 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollars, like Grand Theft Auto 6, once again, that's going to be $1 billion development cycle, most likely. From what we've heard of rumors and everything else, it's not confirmed, it's not official or anything. But they've spent a lot of money making sure that the map is the biggest map we've ever seen, make sure that the graphics are the best they can be, to make sure that all, mocap to facial rigs to, artist designs to 3D rendering, modeling, the mocap stuff with the animation work and everything, making sure that all that stuff is the most AAA top-notch product that you've ever seen. So with that comes a lot of years of development, and yes, we have to wait for that development. We're waiting just as much as it is a giant cost to make this, and it's as many years as it takes. There's a lot of people that they will start working on the project, they don't even get to finish the project because it takes so many years and so long of crunch hours and just so many sleepless nights, if you will, of working on developing a game and everything. So this is just like, just a little bit of thought process to go through when it comes to like, why isn't Grand Theft Auto 6, made and out and ready and to go and everything. Yeah, like everybody that I've ever heard that is a game developer talk about, like, man, I'm so proud to have shipped this game and that they're still with the companies when the game is shipping. And it's kind of one of those weird things of like, we are waiting for a game to, come out and be developed and, released and everything. But there is also so many people working on it that have almost a bigger weight, because it's like, oh man, like they also are waiting, and while they're working on it, because they're waiting to be able to play the full product, the final product also themselves. If not, they might also be, because yes, game developers, don't get me wrong when I'm saying, of like, game developers, they play the game as they're working on it, but the final product, the most polished version of it, hopefully when it comes out, the least buggy, you have all the textures in there, all the sounds are working, and the music is ready to go and all that stuff. There's nothing missing from the storyline. You actually get a cohesive storyline from start to finish, if the game is done properly, I know. But yeah, that's just like, again, like the ones that are working on it have almost a bigger weight, because they already know, they've been hyped up for years on the first trailer that gets shown to the public that you end up seeing. You're hearing all these rumors and leaks and everything else, and a lot of times rumors don't even come true, and the leaks are all full of but these developers, again, every single day they're staring at this product, and they're working on it, they're making it and everything. So it's definitely one of these things of, it's kind of a weird thing to think of, like, they're spending this amount of money on it, and for everyone that is, going on and on about like $70 for a game. Well, if a game is, it takes 10 to 20 to 30 40 to 50 million dollars to make, and you're spending just $70 on it, that's a pretty decent price tag, especially, again, between that, like a 10 to a 30 hour versus 100+ hour. Again, the amount of content that you're getting there, a movie only runs for 2 hours, 3 hours, and people get bored because it's not interactive, and then, we can sit in front of a game for 100 hours plus and, platinum it or 100% it, or, and do speed runs and everything else. So the amount of value there is definitely something to take in consideration and think about. That $70 kind of goes a long ways when you really, break it down and boil it down to that. Maybe you're making videos, maybe you make a, like a retrospect on it, or a storyline video talking about the storyline and all that stuff. Then you actually make money back from it if you're one of the content creators or whatever, a YouTuber or such, or a streamer or something. So I think one of the other thought process things too is, should games be, shorter length, which would probably make more releases happen. So right now, the average, big AAA game and all that, like, Grand Theft Auto is taking like 10 years to make, but on average, a big AAA product is in development for about 3 to 5 years. So that means you get probably one entry into a big AAA, big budget franchise. You get like one entry almost, maybe two entries of a game each console cycle. So the next, like, God of War, let's say, we're not going to see another God of War until maybe a PlayStation 5 Pro or a PlayStation 6. I think it's probably going to be a PS6 at this rate. We're not going to be seeing God of War until probably like 2030, maybe. That's how long it's going to probably take to make the next God of War. The same way with like a Devil May Cry, the same way with a, whenever Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, we're not seeing another game until like maybe like 10 years. It's definitely going to be on another console. So when Grand Theft Auto 6, hopefully it comes out and it works really well. We're not seeing another Rockstar game unless it's like something else, Red Dead or something that they've already been working on alongside, in another Rockstar Studios that, that is not working on Grand Theft Auto 6. So the question comes up is like, if we have a game that is not 100 hours plus, and we start to scale back the games to be so, Assassin's Creed Valhalla was like 100 hours plus with all the DLC, with even the main storyline and everything. There was so much content in Valhalla. Assassin's Creed Mirage was only like a 10-hour campaign playthrough. Like, you could just kind of just go right through it real quick and all that. And again, it brings up the whole thought process of like, so should we have shorter games, and then like, 2 or 3 games that come out in a console generation, like we did back on the PS2, like we did kind of on the Xbox 360, on the it stopped on the Xbox One and the PS4, really. Um, so should we go back to that era where we have shorter games but more of them, or do people not mind having more content, like I said, like 100 hours plus, but then you only get like one game every 5 to 10 years? It's a big toss up right there of like, man. Also, for all of us 90s kids, we're not getting any younger, which is another funny thing to think about. And for all the developers that, are in their, maybe late 40s, early 50s, that means they might only have maybe 2 to 3 games left in them before they might want to start retiring. Because, we are at that point in the industry too, where it's like, people are getting in their 50s or 60s. Some of them are in their 70s. So then it's like, man, if you spend 10 years working on one game, that's kind of like the last of your legacy that you're working on. So that's also kind of a crazy thing to think about too. Is like, not only, these big studio heads that are, I mean, they're working on one game, and they could have, if they're a little bit younger and they're like in their mid 30s of a studio head working on something, they could have, a kid or two, and, moved house, moved state or something, if they're living in the US. There's so much that happens during the development cycle of just one game now, because it does take so much. There's so much invested in that one product. And then if it comes out and it's not good, and the public doesn't, be like, this is amazing, then you've kind of just wasted so many years of everything that you worked on, other than like getting the experience and, figuring out what works and what doesn't work. It's just definitely, it's one of those things to, keep in mind of like, everything that you play, somebody had to make. Everything that you see that's happening on your screen, that you're hearing on the screen and all that, even loading screens and such, making the controllers work and everything, somebody has to program it. Somebody has to make the assets. A whole bunch of people have to put it together to make it actually function. So on top of the 100-hour plus thing, another thing that comes to mind is, should 100 hours plus be a rarity? So back in the day, like when Skyrim came out, I remember seeing a whole bunch of people go, oh my God, this thing is, there's like 100 hours worth of content here. That used to be a rarity way back, in that late PS2, early Xbox 360, PS3 era. Was, if something was 100 hours plus, it was like, whoa, that's a lot of content. Granted, games were also like $50 back then. But, I mean, the level of detail and the amount of content that is in 100 hours now is actually even more so. You get more out of that 100 hours than you would back in the day, too. So that's also something to think about. But, should we make that more of a rarity thing, 100 hours plus? I mean, it's not... it's not up to us consumers. It's really up to the publishers how much they want to fund and how much, development time they want to let the studio end up having to, make 100 hours plus of content in a game. So then I guess the last little thought bubble on this train is, what's the perfect length of a $70 game? Is the perfect length for a $70 game 100 hours plus? Or is the perfect length for a $70 game something like a 20 to 30 hour? I think the stats would probably come out to be, because it seems like whenever anybody sees that 100 hours plus mark, everybody's like, oh God, this is going to take forever to get through. You really want to see what happens. You're a big fan of the game and everything, but you're just looking at like, how am I going to make time to get through? Especially if you're a content creator too. It's like the amount of rush that we have. If two games come out within a week and they're both 100-hour plus, it's like it's impossible. You're not going to be able to finish one before the next one comes out and be able to do coverage on both of them equally like that. So maybe going forward, maybe game development should actually look at cutting it back a little bit and making games down to like that 20 to 50 hour mark, and that be 50 hours of content for $70 sounds bad on paper, but when it comes down to how much time you actually have to spend on top, you also have to remember that the amount of that $70 goes so much farther now because, again, games just do so much more. There's so much more depth and detail to what the hell you're doing in any game nowadays. Whether it be a simulator to a story-driven game to a racing game to a shooting game, everything, especially if it has an online mode, that $70 goes so far. Or a battle pass or something where it's like, maybe you spend $10 extra, but then you get another 10 hours, yeah, so just a little something I was thinking about. Again, the thought train popped up off from a podcast I was hearing of developers talking about all this stuff, and yeah, it was just something to keep in mind when you're seeing people either complain about the industry of, well, there's no good games out, or games cost so much nowadays, or why does it take so long to develop a game and all that. Again, just keep the this information in mind when you're seeing that stuff online and everything, because again, everything that you can interact with or see on a screen, whether it's CGI or any, it's people. There's so many people that are both employed and getting paid to make that stuff, but also there's just so many people that are making it happen. There's so many different developers out there. And also give shout out to your developers. If you really like a game, for your favorite game, always give the development team a big shout out. Don't just yell at developers when they don't make something or when they make something you don't like. Make sure and also, give a little bit of a round of applause for different game companies, especially if you think something should have won like Game of the Year or something. Give them a shout out. It'll make their day. It'll make everybody's day, right there. So, yeah. Hit the sub button if you liked anything of this video. Definitely trying to get 500 mark. And yeah, I'll have more Let's Talks and gameplays. Not gameplay, but Let's Talks, retrospects, and more, and all that good stuff. And, just I'm going to be doing my thing. So, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for stopping by. And as always, I will see you next time.